wish is granted?
I wish I were big. That's all it took. One wish, one glowing carnival machine, and a 13-year-old kid who woke up the next morning as Tom Hanks. Welcome to Big, the 1988 fantasy comedy that took a premise so simple it fits on a fortune card, dropped it into the hands of a director Hollywood didn't believe in, and somehow made a movie that, 37 years later, still makes grown adults tear up in a toy store. It starred Tom Hanks as Josh Baskin, the boy who got exactly what he asked for and immediately had no idea what to do with it. Elizabeth Perkins as the woman who fell for him without knowing he was technically in 6th grade. Robert Loggia as the boss who saw something in Josh that everyone else had missed. And a giant floor piano that turned two middle-aged men in suits into the most joyful 90 seconds of the entire decade. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about Big that you've probably never heard before. The director Robert De Niro called when the salary negotiation collapsed. The A-lister who got the flu mid-scene decided it wasn't worth coming back and watched the film become a $151 million blockbuster from his couch. The Broadway adaptation that somehow convinced FAO Schwarz to co-produce its own toy commercial, and still lost every dollar. And stick around for number 1, because the most effortless-looking scene in the movie almost had Tom Hanks replaced by professional dancers. Almost. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel. Now grab your quarter, find your Zultar machine, and let's get into the countdown. Number 15, Tom Hanks. Built his whole performance by copying a real kid. One reason Big still holds up is because Hanks never plays Josh like a grown man doing goofy bits. He plays him like an actual middle schooler, bewildered, delighted, slightly overwhelmed by everything. That's not an accident. Penny Marshall figured out how to engineer it. Before Hanks filmed a single adult Josh scene, she had David Moscow, the 13-year-old playing young Josh, act out each scene on camera first. Then she handed those tapes to Hanks. He studied Moscow's specific body language, the awkward pauses, the exact way he moved through a room, and Moscow gave him something specific to steal. At 12, his feet were growing faster than the rest of him. He wore Converse, which already ran a size bigger than normal, and the combination gave him a clumsy duck-footed shuffle that was just how he moved every day. Moscow later told MTV News, "There was this weird kid duck walk, and Hanks asked for larger shoes so he could imitate that walk. So in the movie, he's kind of flopping around in these shoes." Hanks told Moscow the shoes really affected how he walked. He took all the quirky, awkward things about being a kid and, in Moscow's words, tuned them up and had them live in him. Off camera, Hanks stayed in full giant kid mode the whole shoot. Marshall put him, Jared Rushton, and Moscow in a room full of toys during pre-production with no instructions. A silly string war broke out. That improvised chaos became the silly string scene in the actual movie. Hanks later used this same technique on Forrest Gump, spending time with a young actor playing Child Forrest, absorbing his specific Southern accent. He invented a system. Learn a role by watching a kid be a kid. Work twice. 1 Oscar nomination, 1 actual Oscar. Not a bad method. Number 14, Hollywood passed every famous actor. Alive before Hanks said yes. The list of people who turned down Josh Baskin is not short. It is a comprehensive tour of nearly every major leading man working in Hollywood in 1987. Hanks was Marshall's first choice. He said no, scheduling conflicts with Dragnet and Punchline. So Marshall went hunting, and it became one of the strangest casting runs of the decade. John Travolta desperately wanted it. According to Marshall's memoir, My Mother Was Nuts, the studio labeled him box office poison and shut it down. His 80s had been brutal. Staying Alive, Two of a Kind, Perfect, all flopped hard. The rejection aged terribly. 16 months after Big hit theaters, Look Who's Talking resurrected his career overnight. Kevin Costner passed. Warren Beatty was interested. Price too high. Dennis Quaid passed for everybody's All-American. Albert Brooks said flat out he didn't want to play a kid. Robin Williams passed. Michael Keaton passed. Bill Murray was offered it and said no. He chose Scrooged instead. Scrooge made $100 million, so Murray did fine, but still. Then the studio moved to Robert De Niro. De Niro was officially cast. Then that fell apart. And that story is coming at number 8 because it deserves its own fact. Eventually, word of De Niro's exit got back to Hanks. He reconsidered, came back, and earned his first Academy Award nomination for the part he'd already turned down once. Every single person on that list watched that happen from somewhere else. Number 13, the baby corn scene. Wasn't in the script. The scene at the fancy corporate party, where Josh faces a table of gourmet food and handles it exactly the way a real 13-year-old would, is one of the funniest 20 seconds in the movie. Almost none of it came from the writers. The script had the caviar bit. Josh bites in. His face registers immediate pure protest. That was written. The writers figured that was enough comedy for one buffet table. Then Marshall spotted the baby corn at the catering setup. She picked it up and signaled it to Hanks. He got it immediately. What he did with it is committed and completely specific, nibbling across the tiny cob row by row, his head doing the little side-to-side turns at the end of each pass, exactly the way you'd work through a full-sized ear of corn at a summer barbecue. Except he's in a tuxedo at a cocktail party, where everyone around him is pretending to be impressed by each other. Josh doesn't see hors d'oeuvres. He sees miniature food from a planet where rich people eat things the size of their thumb and call it dinner. Marshall said they tried around 10 different improvised bits at that buffet table. The corn was the one that stuck. And according to the film's 35th anniversary coverage in Cracked, Hanks improvised at least 15 separate bits during the entire party scene. 15. The writers got credited for a sequence built mostly out of whatever Marshall pointed at, and Hanks picked up. A random piece of catering corn. One of the most quoted visual gags of the decade. The writers never knew it was coming. Number 12, the shimmy shimmy chant. Came from Tom Hanks' Kid. The hand clap chant Josh uses to prove to Billy he's really Josh, the secret code only 2 real childhood best friends would know, came from Tom Hanks' actual son, Colin. Colin was around 10 when his dad was shooting big. He'd just come back from summer camp, where he'd picked up the chant from other kids there, came home, taught it to his dad. Hanks heard it and knew immediately. That is exactly the kind of weird, specific nonsense ritual that real childhood friendships run on. The kind that makes zero sense to any adult who hears it, because the scene wasn't working. The writers had cycled through different versions. Nothing felt authentic. It all sounded like adults writing what they imagined kids would say, which is the fastest way to make something feel completely fake. Hanks went to Marshall and pitched the camp chant. She loved it on the spot. The scene that makes adults feel like kids again every time they watch it, the secret handshake that proves everything, was a real thing from a real camp, carried home by a 10-year-old named Colin, who had no idea what he just handed his father. One summer camp chant. Permanent pop culture history. Not a bad contribution for a kid who was probably thinking about lunch. Number 11, Deborah Winger. Was cast got pregnant, lobbied to turn Josh into a girl. The role of Susan Lawrence, the woman who falls for Josh without knowing he's actually 13, was not written for Elizabeth Perkins. It was written for Deborah Winger. Winger was cast. Pre-production was underway. Then she became pregnant and had to leave. On her way out, she did something audacious. She lobbied Marshall to rewrite Josh from a boy into a girl, specifically into a role for her. Marshall actually considered it for a minute. Then she worked through the script scene by scene and hit the wall every version of this idea eventually hits. A 13-year-old boy in an adult relationship with a grown woman was already the thing that gives modern audiences pause. A 13-year-old girl in that same scenario with an adult man is a completely different film with a completely different problem. Marshall killed the rewrite. And on her way out, Winger recommended the actress who should replace her, Elizabeth Perkins. That recommendation led directly to one of the most quietly charged performances in the film, and Perkins has been living with the consequences ever since. She told The Guardian. "I get it," she said. "The only thing I can say is, it was a different time. It was the 80s. David Moscow, who played young Josh, told Yahoo Entertainment in 2018 he doesn't think Big could be made the same way today. I think people would jump on it. The press, before it even came out, would be ripping it to shreds. The most beloved family film of 1988 is also the one its own cast believes couldn't exist now. Number 10, Jon Lovitz got the flu, threw up mid-scene, and then talked himself out of returning to a blockbuster. Jon Lovitz plays Scotty, the cubicle mate who gives Josh spectacularly terrible career advice about deliberately underperforming so your bosses never expect too much from you. Small part. Was supposed to feel bigger. Marshall had promised Lovitz he could improvise the role the way he had on her previous film, Jumpin' Jack Flash. Then on set, she told him the writers had vetoed it. Play it straight. Lovitz wasn't thrilled. He told her directly, "Penny, the part's nothing. You said I could." She told him the writers didn't want improvisation. Marshall later admitted she engineered the whole thing. She knew telling him he couldn't improvise would make him sneak in subtle comedy anyway, which was exactly what she wanted. Then he got the flu. Mid-scene one day, production called, cut, and Lovitz ran and threw up, told Marshall he couldn't work anymore, went home, was genuinely wrecked for about a week. Here's where it gets painful. Once he started feeling better, he thought about calling Marshall to say he was ready to come back and finish his remaining scenes. Then he thought about it a little more, decided the part wasn't worth the trouble, stayed home. Big became one of the biggest movies of 1988. Hanks got an Oscar nomination. The piano scene became immortal. $151 million on an $18 million budget. Lovitz's own words from a 2010 AV Club interview, "It turns out to be this huge hit, and I'm like, I'm an idiot." Number 9, the original ending. Had Susan kissed Josh on the lips. By the farewell scene, Susan knows the truth. The man she's been dating is a 13-year-old boy. And in the original script, their goodbye was a kiss, on the lips. Between a fully informed adult woman and a child she was fully aware was a child. Marshall looked at it and shut it down immediately. The goodbye became a kiss on the forehead instead. That single change is what turns the ending from something genuinely uncomfortable into something bittersweet and protective. The forehead kiss reads, "As love for someone you're letting go." The lip kiss would have been something else entirely, a 4-inch adjustment in geography that saved the entire emotional tone of the film. But that wasn't even the strangest version that got floated. Studio executives push for an ending where Susan, unwilling to lose Josh, finds the Zultar machine herself and wishes to become a child again. The film would end with a young girl, a de-aged Susan, walking into Josh's classroom. Marshall rejected it. Her stated reasoning? What is Susan supposed to tell her parents? Here's the strange part. For years, fans have sworn they remember seeing this alternate ending. The rumor claims a young girl appears in Josh's classroom in early test screenings before being cut. The Canadian edition of the Book of Lists printed it as an established fact in 2005. No footage has ever surfaced. No deleted scenes exist on any home video release. It has become one of Hollywood's most persistent Mandela effect debates. Thousands of people remember watching a scene that apparently never made it to film. Marshall changed 4 inches of blocking and accidentally created a decades-long mass false memory. Not bad for one directorial decision. Number 8. Robert De Niro was actually cast. Then his $6 million salary demand killed it. After everyone else said no and Hanks was unavailable, the role of Josh officially went to Robert De Niro. Not a screen test, not a consideration. Cast. De Niro was meeting with cast members, including Jared Rushton, who would play Billy. Elizabeth Perkins was doing readings opposite him. The writers began actively retooling the script for what IMDb's trivia database describes as a more urban 13-year-old. A version of Big starring Robert De Niro was in active development. De Niro confirmed it himself on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon in 2021. "We had a thing, an issue with the negotiations, so it went the way it went." De Niro's salary demand was $6 million, and Hanks eventually accepted the role for $2 million. The gap was the wide, and nobody bridged it. Perkins told Andy Cohen on Watch What Happens Live in 2021 what it felt like to do those readings. The whole movie felt completely different, moodier, darker. Then she said it would have been almost like a horror movie. Almost like a horror movie. The co-star of the actual film, describing the alternate universe where Robert De Niro plays a 13-year-old kid discovering adulthood. Travis Bickle, Jake LaMotta, wandering FAO, Schwartz in a suit, jumping on a giant piano with his feet. De Niro's exit is the only reason Hanks reconsidered his original no. The domino fell. Hanks came back and took the job for $2 million. But that is fine. De Niro told Fallon. Fine. Number 7, Spielberg was going to direct it, with Harrison Ford as the 13-year-old kid. Before De Niro, before Hanks, before Penny Marshall entered the picture, Big was supposed to be a Steven Spielberg film, with Harrison Ford as Josh Baskin, Indiana Jones, as a 13-year-old boy in an adult body, in a toy store, playing chopsticks with his feet. The script was co-written by Anne Spielberg, Steven's younger sister, alongside her neighbor Gary Ross. Steven was attached to direct. Ford was his intended lead. Matthew Modine, who also read the script during early casting, described the version he received as a much darker movie. Marshall acknowledged that Ford in the role would have fundamentally changed things. Her quote to the Washington Post, "Harrison Ford isn't considered a laughing riot." Spielberg dropped out due to scheduling conflicts with Empire of the Sun in 1987. But he also said publicly that he stepped aside because he didn't want to overshadow Anne's moment as co-writer, that directing the film would have pulled credit away from her script. Both things were probably true. And here's the reversal that makes this more than just a casting footnote. Marshall confirmed later that if Spielberg had stayed on, Big would have beaten every rival body swap film to theaters. She told The Morning Call, if Steven had done it, it would probably have been the first Switch film out. Instead, his scheduling conflict pushed the film to a TV actress on her second feature, who then made history with it. Spielberg dropping out didn't hurt Big. It may have been exactly what the film needed. Number 6, The Evil Wizard game was completely fake. Kids spent years hunting for it. Kids who saw Big in 1988 went home and spent years, actual years, hunting software shelves for the Cavern of the Evil Wizard. They described it in careful detail to confused electronics boutique employees who had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. Because the game didn't exist, it was built specifically for the film. And for a technical reason, almost nobody who watched ever thought about it. Real computer games in 1988 looked terrible on camera. CGA graphics used 4 colors, filming CRT monitors at 24 frames per second, while those monitors refreshed at a different rate, created rolling scan lines and flickering that made any genuine game footage look like a television dying during a thunderstorm. A real game on screen would have destroyed the illusion immediately. So, a completely custom system was built. Authentic-looking 4-color graphics, carefully designed to avoid the timing problems that ruined real game footage on film. They did too good a job. Kids completely believed it. The Cavern of the Evil Wizard haunted a generation's memory as something they'd missed, something that must exist on a shelf they hadn't checked yet. Fans eventually decided to fix reality. In 2009, developer BombTunes built a playable Flash version of the game. Then, in 2020, developer Monty Mongoose went further and created a full MS-DOS style adventure for Adventure Jam 2020. After 3 decades of being a collective false memory, the Cavern of the Evil Wizard finally became something you can actually play. Number 5, someone turned Big into a Broadway musical, and it lost every single dollar. In the 90s, Hollywood became convinced every successful film needed to become a Broadway musical. Someone looked at Big and thought, yes, audiences want Tom Hanks trapped in a 30-year-old body. But now everyone sings about it. The production was genuinely stacked. Director Mike Ockrent, who had helmed Crazy for You. Choreographer Susan Stroman, who would go on to win 5 Tony Awards, including for The Producers. Songwriters David Shire and Richard Maltby Jr. Book by John Weidman, who wrote Pacific Overtures and Assassins. This was not a cut-rate creative team. This was Broadway royalty, assembled for a $10 million production that should have worked. Here's where it gets ugly. F.A.O. Schwartz was listed as a co-producer. In the Variety opening night review from April 1996, the full billing reads, "In association with F.A.O. Schwartz, Fifth Avenue," critics noticed. The show came across in multiple reviews like an expensive toy commercial, and the timing was catastrophic. Big opened at the Schubert Theater on April 28, 1996, directly into the wake of Rent and Bring In Da Noise, Bring In Da Funk, 2 shows rewriting what Broadway could be. A feel-good family wish machine musical had no oxygen. 193 performances. Closed October 13th, 1996. 5 Tony nominations. Best Book, Best Score, Best Choreography, Best Actress, Best Featured Actor. 0 wins. Not even nominated for Best Musical, which is like getting invited to prom and told you can only stand near the punch bowl. Lost its entire $10 million investment. At the time, it was ranked among Broadway's costliest disasters. Number 4. Penny Marshall made Hollywood history. On her second film. On July 22, 1988, a brief item ran in the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner announcing that Big had surpassed Barbra Streisand's Yentl as the highest-grossing film ever directed by a woman. Shortly after, it crossed $100 million, and Penny Marshall became the first female director in the history of Hollywood, in the entire history of Hollywood, to make a film that grossed more than $100 million at the box office. This was her second feature. Her first was Jumpin' Jack Flash in 1986. Her second broke a record no woman had ever reached. She did it with an $18 million budget on a premise 3 rival studios were simultaneously executing, with a cast assembled largely after everyone bigger said no. She had spent a decade being known as Laverne from Laverne and Shirley, constantly compared to her more famous brother Gary, who had created half of television's biggest shows. And then she made Big, and it became the most successful film directed by a woman in cinema history to that point. 4 years later, she directed A League of Their Own. Also crossed $100 million. She became the first woman director to hit the milestone twice. After her death in December 2018, Tom Hanks wrote publicly that there would never be a better boss, a better friend, or a better maker of movies. Number 3. 3 competing films were already out. The cast thought Big was dead on arrival. While Big was still shooting, 3 other body swap films had beaten them to theaters, and the cast knew it. First came Like Father, Like Son in October 1987. Dudley Moore and Kirk Cameron, bodies swapped via magic potion, made $34.4 million on a $10.5 million budget. Then Italy released De Grande in December 1987, an 8-year-old boy who magically becomes an adult overnight, essentially the same premise. Then Vice Versa in March 1988. Judge Reinhold and Fred Savage, Tibetan Skull, bodies swapped. Grossed only $13.7 million. Then 18 again. In April 1988, George Burns wishing to be young at his 81st birthday, swapping with his grandson after a car accident. Critics dismissed it. Audiences stayed home. By the time Big was prepping its June 3rd release, the atmosphere was dreadful. Perkins said it plainly. There were maybe 5 body-changing movies happening at the same time, and she and Hanks looked at each other and thought, this is going straight to video. Marshall only found out about the competing films after she'd already signed on. Someone sent her the scripts as a courtesy. She read them and decided hers was different. This film is sweeter, she told the Morning Call. I had a love story to tell. The others had car chases. She was right. Like Father Like Son, Vice Versa, and 18 Again, now live primarily in the memories of dedicated 80s film collectors. Big is in the Library of Congress National Film Registry, selected for preservation as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The movie everyone thought would vanish is a national treasure. The competition is a footnote. Marshall called it From Inside the Panic and delivered. Number 2. Fox never trademarked Zultar. Someone in Nevada did it themselves 18 years later. The Zultar machine, glowing, fortune-telling. The reason any of this happens was not a real antique arcade game. It was a custom movie prop, no working mechanics, no actual fortune cards. According to Olaf Stanton, founder of Characters Unlimited in Boulder City, Nevada, the company that now manufactures Zultar machines worldwide, the original prop simply opened his mouth and had no arms. It was a one-off movie prop. Zultar did have a real ancestor. Before the movie, there existed a machine called Zoltan, with an N, a real penny arcade fortune teller from the late 1960s and early 70s. The filmmakers tweaked the name to Zultar because it sounded more mythical, and the movie version became 10,000 times more famous than the machine that inspired it. Here's where 20th Century Fox probably wishes they had a trademark lawyer on call. They never filed for the Zultar name, not in 1988 when the film came out. Not during the years it became a cultural touchstone. Not across the nearly 2 decades, the machine became one of the most recognized images in American pop culture. Stanton discovered the gap in 2006 and claimed the Zultar trademark for himself, built a whole business on it. His machines move their eyes, turn their heads, dispense real fortune cards. Over 2 million Zultar fortunes are told every year, according to Stanton. Fox had 18 years to trademark the name of the machine that anchored their $151 million movie. They didn't bother. A man in Nevada did it for them. The wish machine granted someone else's wish entirely. Number 1, the piano was too small. They built a bigger one. That piano scene. Hanks and Robert Loggia in suits, bouncing across oversized keys at FAO Schwartz, playing Heart and Soul and Chopsticks, while children watch from the aisles below. It looks like 2 overgrown kids who wandered into a toy store and found something wonderful. It is the most exhaustingly effortless scene in 1988 cinema. Start with the piano. The walking piano on display at FAO Schwartz, the one screenwriter and Spielberg spotted during a visit and wrote directly into the script, was too small. Inventor Remo Saraceni's original model was 6.5 feet long, 1 octave. 2 grown men dancing on it side by side would have looked less like movie magic and more like 2 people arguing over a very narrow kitchen counter. Marshall called Saraceni and told him what she needed: more octaves, more length, and it had to light up when they hit the right notes, something no version had ever done before. Saraceni built it. The finished instrument was nearly 16 feet long, 3 full octaves. A completely custom piece of engineering that had never existed before this movie required it. Then came the rehearsal. Marshall brought in choreographer Patricia Birch, the woman who designed the dance sequences in Grease, to map every step. Hanks and Loggia each took a full-size cardboard replica of the keyboard home to practice on. Weeks of it. Here's where it becomes a story about pride. When Hanks and Loggia arrived at FAO Schwartz to film, waiting in the wings, costumed identically to them, were professional dancers, body doubles. Just in case. Loggia saw them. Hanks saw them. According to Loggia, the decision was immediate. Those men are not touching this piano. They told the dancers to leave and performed the sequence in what Loggia described as just about 1 take. 1 take. After weeks of cardboard at home. After Birch drilled the footwork. After Hanks said they rehearsed until they dropped. 2 men in suits sent the professionals home and danced across a 16-foot custom piano in just about 1 take, because they were not giving that scene to anybody else. Before Big, Saraceni had reportedly sold around 100 walking pianos at $3,500 each. A September 1988 People magazine item reported he expected to ship over 3,000 by Christmas, from 100 to 3,000 in one summer because of 1 scene. The 16-foot movie version was bought by a private collector after production and eventually donated to the Please Touch Museum in Philadelphia, where it went on public display in January 2009. The original FAO Schwartz on 5th Avenue closed in 2015. When FAO Schwartz reopened at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in 2018, a new version of the piano came with it. 35 years after 2 exhausted men in suits sent backup dancers home and did it themselves, the piano is still making people stop and play. That is the power of 1 scene, built by 2 men who refused to let anyone else have it. And that's 15 weird facts about Big, one of the most beloved movies ever made. Which facts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you want more deep dives like this one, hit that like button and subscribe. See you in the next one.